1310 KFKA Mornings with Gail via the Auto Collision Specialist Studios. So pleased to be joined this morning by Dr. Alex Del Carmen, a terrorist expert, Associate Dean and Professor in the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice, and Public Administration at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth, Texas. Dr. Del Carmen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You know, so many people have asked, as we are overwhelmed with emotion this day before the anniversary, the 20th anniversary of those heinous terrorist attacks, was it all worth it in Afghanistan? Sadly, many in the military asking that same question.
Well, it depends on what the mission was, right? If the mission was to convert a government into a democracy, I mean, clearly it was a failure. But from the standpoint of, for the past 20 years, that we haven't had another repeat of 9/11 on U.S. soil, I think to that extent we can thank the many wonderful soldiers that went out there, some of whom gave up their lives in order for us to have that democratic, peaceful transitional power that we have every 4 years and, you know, the democracy that we currently have. So I think from the standpoint of, you know, Afghanistan not serving as a platform for terrorism, yes, it was definitely worth every bit of bitter, sweet victories that we had in Afghanistan. But from an overall perspective of leaving democracy behind, it was an absolute failure.
And surely, though the Taliban is now billing itself as a kinder, gentler Taliban, well, we're seeing much evidence to the contrary. As we're seeing reporters being beaten, those who supported the troops being dragged out of their homes, hunted down and killed, women who protested being locked in basements, and who knows what happens there. But as I'm fond of saying, nature abhors a vacuum. It seems to me so do terrorists. What about the concerns now that Afghanistan is under Taliban rule, and the Taliban hasn't changed its stripes any? Is this going to be a cesspool, a breeding ground for additional terrorist activity with our departure?
Yeah, I believe that there's no question that it will be. First of all, I think that the Taliban is just really buying time right now, in the sense that what they're doing is they realize that this is an optimal time for them to establish themselves as a democratic, legitimate government, so that they can have the economic assistance that they need, the exchange of goods for services that they've had in the past. And so this is a critical time for them, so they have to show their absolute best face. But, you know, you can trust the Taliban, you know, that they're going to be consistent with the past version of who they are and who they were. They still have ties to terrorist groups. There is no question that terrorism still does exist in Afghanistan. And at the end of the day, what's going to happen is that, you know, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, perhaps even earlier, we are going to start seeing that Afghanistan will continue to serve as a platform, as a training ground for terrorist attacks against the United States and U.S. interests. It's very unfortunate, but unfortunately, that is reality for us.
And will they use this, our withdrawal, our retreat, our, let's call it for what it is, our defeat in Afghanistan as a recruitment tool?
There's no question, right? So what they're going to use is they're going to say, look, Americans are not really your friends. They left in a haste. After all the lives that they lost, they still left. They left you behind. We are your only, you know, the only support mechanism that you'll ever need. You have to trust us, not them. And then they'll spin it, right? They'll show all of these images of the United States, the Afghanis that are falling off the airplane as the airplane is taking off, the Kabul, right? And so you know, what's going to happen is they're going to spin this, and they have enough video footage to show for the next 10 years to demonstrate that we're not really good friends, that we're simply individuals that were interested in conquering and dividing their country.
What about those Americans that may still be left behind? Certainly, they'll be held as hostages and be paraded around at the Taliban's behest to make any sort of impression that they want to make. Now, interestingly enough, there was a flight that was allowed to leave from that Kabul airport, and the president's reaction to that, saying that, oh no, the Taliban are very professional and very businesslike. Well, let's just say it rankles tickled some sensibilities. Do you think the U.S. is going to recognize the Taliban as a democratic government?
It's hard to say, but I can tell you with all the due respect that I have for the entities of government that this State Department has simply dropped the ball more than once here. And they better be very careful to not fall into that trap of legitimizing the Taliban government as a legitimate government and then be betrayed by them as we have in the past. What is really unfortunate about what's going on right now is that I believe that, again, the Taliban is at their best behavior. But once they change face, once they show their true colors, it's going to be too late for Americans to leave. So I do hope and pray that Americans that are on the ground in Afghanistan will find this window of opportunity while the Taliban is manipulating their public view of how they're viewed. They can use this small window to get out of the country ASAP.
Now, you had the Department of Homeland Security warning that terrorists could exploit the 9/11 anniversary. Are you concerned about that?
I am, and I think that, as a criminologist, I mean, I've been at this for 25 years, and it is my daily business to, be concerned about the security of our country, law enforcement training and whatnot. And I'll just tell you that for me, it's a landmark moment, not only for us in, where we were 20 years ago, but it also for them, right? For them, it was a victory. For them, it was a day of triumph. And as you may recall, 20 years ago, there were some countries that celebrated 9/11. Because they hate us to that level. So I think that, it's not inconceivable. It's certainly possible and hopefully not probable that there are going to be, at the very least, attempts against U.S. interest overseas and perhaps some landmark issues here in the U.S. But I do know that law enforcement is ready, has been getting ready for some months now, and all entities of our government are cued in as to what's going on. So God willing, we will have a peaceful day of remembrance of the good people that lost their lives that day.
Sadly, when you look at the Taliban, and not to lapse into cliche, but that rather strained relationship between the Taliban and ISIS-X, well, that trite phrase comes to mind: an enemy of my enemy is my friend, and that's my concern. Second, my concern is just because we're seemingly done with the Taliban, Dr. Del Carmen, doesn't mean they're done with us.
That's exactly right. So if you look at the leadership of the Taliban right now, some of its leaders are individuals that were in Guantanamo Bay, right? And they have a long memory. At the end of the day, you also have the triangulation of Iran, China, and Russia that are doing joint exercises early next year. I mean, look, this is a very dangerous world in which we live right now. And just like our capabilities have improved dramatically since 9/11 to protect the homeland, so has the enemy, right, to attack us. And so at the end of the day, we have to be very careful, very cognizant, and we have to work with our allies and friends across the globe to make sure our intelligence is in real time, being assessed here in the U.S., and that we are, in fact, taking action to protect American lives here and overseas as well.
Well, and the thought of sharing intelligence with the Taliban, which has been bandied about, just boggles my mind. It's insane.
Well, not only that, but, you see the images of them, being on our Humvees and, waving while using American equipment that was paid for by your audience and myself and you, through taxes. I mean, it's really insane, right? So when you think about it, we spend 20 years there. We lost thousands of American lives and allies that died serving their countries and our country. And then we pull out in this sort of haste manner at the end of the day that is going to leave permanent images next time we have to intervene overseas. That country that is going to be exposed to our military action is going to have in the back of their minds the pull-out moment from Afghanistan at all. Those are powerful images. And, being in the media, images carry a message that's far greater than words can.
Absolutely. Picture worth 1,000 words. Terrorism expert Dr. Alex Del Carmen heads up the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice, and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth.